Cyberpunk Uncensored.
Wednesday.
Hey, we're live. Everyone can see us now.
Hello.
What's up,
Hi.
everybody? Hey, I see we already have a lot of people joining in nice and early to the chat. I do want to mention to everyone in chat, if volumes are weird, too low, too high, things like that are happening, anything freezes, please just make note of that in the chat. I have it up as part of the stream. So, contribute your ideas to this deep dive. We're going to talk about everything and anything nomads. Now, this isn't going to be, a crunchy sort of video about like the technical side of nomads. Like I already have.
Absolutely
Yeah,
not.
and I've already got a crash course about, the Moto rollability sort of thing. Anyone that wants to learn more about that, go check out Cyberpunk Uncensored on YouTube. You can see the complete crash course and all that stuff. The deep dive series is more about flavor. It's more about fun. We're gonna go over the life path stuff. Then we're gonna talk about different archetypes. We're gonna get into recommended skills and stats depending on how you want to play your nomad. And then we'll take questions from the chat. But throughout the entire episode, please, if you're watching and you have an interesting idea to contribute about what nomads or whatever we're talking about at the moment, put it in chat. We'd love to have you contribute your ideas. So before we get into it, though. Everyone can see I have a guest with me today, Ellen Graham. You might recognize her from Roll to Cast. I'm a big fan, and she's part of the Sirenscape weekly play that I run on the Sirenscape channel. But Ellen, why don't you take a few minutes here and just tell people about you, your brand, where they can find you, all that good stuff.
Thank you so much. It's so funny you say brand. I'm using like the tagline to describe myself that I'm a hot nerd. And on some days I'm just a nerd. So I am Ellen Graham. I am 1/4 of Baby Beard Media, a podcast empire where we make a ttrpg series called Roll to Cast. We just hit our 100th episode, which is really great, and we're wrapping up our latest series, which is Pulp Cthulhu, which is such a rollicking good time. The next season will be Kids on Bikes, which I will have the good fortune to be the GM for, so I'm very excited for that. You can also check out our YouTube series, Baby Beard Media, where we do Let's Plays, and like we've been doing daily content for almost a year, so if you haven't been on it, like plenty. It's a smorgasbord for you to enjoy. And I also play with the Sirenscape gang under the lovely direction of Rob here.
That's
and I'm
me.
sure I do other stuff. Yeah. Handball it to you. I'm sure I do other stuff. I work in theatre, and I come from Australia, so
it's funny.
Sorry.
Every time. Sorry, apologize for that. We'll let it slide.
Yeah,
but
thanks.
it's funny that you mentioned about working on stage. You do all the play stuff, and I guess you produce it. You have your own company that you do. Every time we always plug like who we are, what we do. I'm always like, hey, I'm the founder of Cyberpunk Uncensored. I stream here, I stream there, I play there. And I never really mention too much about like my websites, my marketing company, my filmmaking. I mention it in streams when I get into stuff like that. But it is a big part of who I am, and it's a big part of who you are too. I really like the fact that you're into acting and producing and doing plays and things like that. And I think having those sort of talents. Lean into role playing. It makes you a great role player. I think it's hand in hand, with acting. Also, thanks Renegade for the subscribing. That notification came up. I really appreciate that. And anybody that's familiar with Renegade here, he's part of the new monthly team that we're starting up this Saturday. I've got session 0 going. We have one of your partners from Roll to Cast joining.
I know,
Sean. And then I've got Greg from How to Drink joining us. Steve from Sirenscape Renegade. It should be really fun. And then we got Tarabella Pondsmith, which is a Pondsmith. It's Cody's wife, so it's a great team. And then I've got my other monthly team. That'll be back on the 30th. And then, like we mentioned, the weekly Sirenscape stream, which is on the Sirenscape Twitch, that's every Thursday. So anybody watching, tune into that as well. Like I said, I'm the founder of Cyberpunk Uncensored. Everybody can check out cyberpunkuncensored.com to learn more. Or check out the links in the description. I'm gonna leave it at that. But let's
get a modern guy. You got streams coming here out of the wazoo. Everywhere. Streams everywhere.
but yeah, let's get into this. Let's dive into the deep dive. Let's talk about nomads. I loved, every episode I love the guest to kind of, I don't know, run it. I'll interject
Oh,
in
cool.
things. But, first and foremost, let's go over the life path. Cyberpunk in general has always had a great life path system from the beginning till now. Red elaborated on that. I love it because it's not just the general life path, but each role has their own life path. And that's what we'll start with today. So if you just want to maybe first describe what a nomad is, and then just let's take us through the life path.
Yeah, so we have like the kind of stock standard description of nomads, which kind of carries over from 2020 into Red. They're transport experts, ultimate road warriors, pirates and smugglers who keep the world connected, which is a great way to be, especially when a nuke has been dropped in Night City.
Yeah.
So it's all coming up for it's all coming up Millhouse for the nomads.
It totally is, yeah. Yeah, they got super noble and like, requirement or whatever. I don't know the right word, but a necessity during the time of Red. Because like you said, they handle all the transportation and supply chains and,
well, yeah.
So
it's fun to be a nomad in Red because like from being a ostracized kind of group in 2020 to be like, yeah, you come back, see?
Exactly. Although I got to say, you see how it ends up in 2077. If you have that world book from Dark Horse, It kind of explains, and you see it in the game, like nomads transitioned back into like gangs or almost having that sort of mentality and lifestyle. And it makes sense because as it gets into the future, all of a sudden they're not needed to run transport and supply chains anymore as technology gets back and all these things are restored. And they're just like, well, fuck, now we don't have a job. Like, I guess we'll get into gang activity style shit now.
For me, nomads have always been a kind of great blend of old world meets new world and kind of, what necessities that are required by like human labor will there still be in the cyberpunk world and because obviously Chew 2, it's like it's such an outdated kind of thing. I mean, we've already moved on from like petrol as such, so it's just like they're already kind of not being phased out, but nomads are like kind of always on the precipice of not being relevant to society anymore. So I think it's a great way if you want to blend a little bit of old world, a little bit of new world.
I like that,
which is kind of Cyberpunk is all about. But should we kick into the life path?
Yeah, let's do it.
So obviously nomads, like the kind of shtick is that they're a group. They need to band together because otherwise you need people to keep the engine running, literally, but then also they're your family. When you're camping, when you're out living, you kind of somehow amalgamate a group, a pack. I know a lot of nomads kind of see that as their family, which you can interpret as like, it could be a relationship, but it could also just be like, these are people I work with. and we stick together purely out of survival kind of thing. So you can have like just a little group that you travel with, and then it kind of keeps getting bigger. You've got a dozen, 40 or 50, 100, a blood family, which is like hundreds, and then an affiliated family, which is just like, think of it like the mafia almost, where it's like you've got all these big families under the one kind of group, and from there you can kind of probably splinter off. Which is, I mean, mafia is not a bad like analogy as well in terms of how I sometimes think about nomads, where it's like it's all about the family, like their top priority, and how you kind of structure your nomad culture would generally be like, sorry, whoever I'm working with, it's always going to be, my gang, like first and foremost.
Exactly.
So,
and like VBB in chat says, we're a friendly mafia though, unlike those dirty Raph and Shiv.
Oh,
I like that. Perfect.
A friendly, your neighborhood mom and pop mafia.
But it just popped in my head too. Before we get to the next section, so obviously the first one in life path determines size. But before we get to the next one, I wanted to get my Sirenscape going here. Shout out to Sirenscape. We mentioned the gameplay. They're also an official sponsor of Cyberpunk Uncensored. And I just wanted to put some searing hot winds, desert noises in the background of our stream, just so it kind of can maybe represent them traveling through the Badlands or something. So, and shout out to Cyberfight Clothing as well. They're another official sponsor. So okay.
Oh yeah,
let's,
I'm wearing my black milk today. I don't know if you can quite see it.
Oh,
but
nice.
It's the Johnny Silverhand.
Oh hell yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Here we are, Cyberpunk.
Hell yeah.
But it's like hard because I have to like either do that for you to properly see it,
right?
Otherwise, it's just like a black top. But I am wearing it. Give me my street cred.
Nice.
I need it. So we've got like the family size. Then you've also got to figure out what base do your nomads operate, because it's transport, it's construction, it's gangs, it's all that kind of stuff, but that can happen with any kind of transport. So you've got land, air, sea, any way you can get around. You got to figure out what kind of pack they are, and then from there you kind of figure out, okay, if they're on land, what are they? Cargo, do they go around protecting, are they a kind of bunch that they got to go protect the cargo as it's moving? Are they mercenaries? Do they just work in construction? Migrant farmers? And as I rolled, very luckily in our campaign Feed the Beast, I rolled traveling show / carnival, and I could not have been happier.
Nice.
That one in particular, traveling show and carnival, I think is so exciting. In terms of nomad lore, because as we talked about it, like, yeah, they're the essential workers, and they're always like, when is society going to turn on us again? But the thing is, like, yes, you've got brain dancers, yes, you've got all these kind of things, but there is a very human element in the arts always. And as someone who works in theater, that's like totally a thing I vibe with, where it's you can't get robots to do the art, and if you can, then there still needs to be some human element, who's writing the scripts, who's coding it.
No, and I love what you did with the Nomad. I'm a big fan of these deep dives, because I get to explain, tangent ideas and alternative ideas to playing different roles. And I think the fact that Arts Halsorian, put that right in here. You always think of migrant farmers, cargo shipments, all this stuff with Red, but they put in there, traveling show, carnival, and I just think that's great because it's really unique. I don't think it's something you typically in the past would think of when you're thinking nomad. And I'm glad that you dove into that and made your nomad, right along those lines. That's really cool that you rolled that and you went with it on Roll the Cast.
And with that, like, I leaned into the aesthetic of old world. So, I went with our old-fashioned family circus, with the big tricks. And obviously with Cyberpunk, you can always update it. So, they have big explosions. They have huge pyrotechnics. You got to think about, I guess with everything in Cyberpunk, it's always more. And when everything is commodified, people have to work even harder to kind of get an edge in. It's kind of like, everyone's always crushed under the wheel of consumerism.
Right.
What a fun role-playing game. It is though.
And I love the entertainment aspect of that, because all the other ones are more of that, like you said, the essential worker side of it versus the entertainment.
Yeah.
And it just, I don't know, it makes, as far as for a GM too, just so many different weird campaign ideas come to mind, because now you're not just dealing with the job of transport or who you work with and, okay, let me work around what you typically transport, but with this whole entertainment aspect, it's, man, any fan, anyone in the crowd, anywhere you're going to entertain, it's not like it's a particular type of transport. You're literally entertaining all kinds of people. So I don't know, it just seems more broad for options. I really like that.
Yeah, it's putting that humanity kind of back into the world where people literally travel to perform face to face. And also, like, I love that because with that, Artilsorian is already going whatever, whatever you can think of. I love their kind of, approach to hey, this world is also yours. Don't feel afraid to chip in stuff, because you could almost have like pit races and things like that. And then, once you've got your nomad gang, like, how do they do recreation? Because that's always important. But I'm getting sidetracked. We've also got air and sea nomads, which I have not delved into yet as a player, but they sound so fun. In our Sirenscape game, obviously, Phil Bud comes from like a floating barge kind of thing, which is a very cool element of Red. But obviously, we've still got sea transport and stuff like that. And then you've got to think, what's at sea? Pirates. Yeah, baby, we can go full Pirates of the Caribbean in Cyberpunk Red. The world is your oyster. Oh, it's a little nautical pun. But then similar things. You've always got cargo that needs to be moved, and depending on where you are in the world, it might just be easier and safer to move it by sea. Smuggling, combat support, and submarine warfare. Sorry, submarines as well are a very fun thing to delve into.
Yeah, I really like the fact that they brought in submarines, and if you notice in Red, they actually mentioned the deep divers and the societies that live under the water in those domes that have kind of been, I don't know. I did a Night City Live episode. Anybody that wants to go to Cyberpunk Uncensored YouTube, look up the Night City Live series. Me and Lobster Falcon did a whole thing about the deep divers as well, and the fact like that they're in these underwater society domes, possibly cut off from the rest of society. There's just so much weirdness that can go on there. And then when you think about submarine warfare and stuff, like, it's just a whole different world you typically don't think about when you think cyberpunk. Everyone's like up in the city, maybe out in the Badlands, and you'll see AVs and you'll fly and stuff, but you rarely think about the sea, and especially underwater. I really like that.
That's the thing I like with nomads, like the possibility to think about, because this is what cyberpunk, it's our world, but just kind of differently imagined, or it's a dark prediction, right? So with nomads, you can really think about a lot of essential services that we have today, like just drawing from my own experience. My dad used to work for an oil company, which is like, boo. But but also it is a huge kind of empire that grabs a lot of like not fully educated young people, because it's stable. Capitalism always needs it, and it's just a big thing that literally requires manual labor. So you can think of even oil, like oil barges, or the little kind of, I don't know what you call them, but the oil rigs that you have like out in the ocean of like fucking nowhere. So someone has to, wherever there is something like buildings or something that is valuable to the corpse, they will always require manual labor to protect it. Like they could just probably use drones, but that is not how capitalism works. It's always the thing of like, but we need more jobs, so let's create useless jobs. Right. So there's a lot of useless jobs in the world that you can really draw on, that it's like, people don't need to be doing that. But absolutely. So yeah, you think oil rigs, you think barges, you think way down, research facilities is really a cool one to draw upon. Maybe people just like fully retreated and they didn't come back out. Are people in the Antarctic in Cyberpunk? Probably not, because actually they're probably fine, because it's probably melted. Right. It's probably tropical there now. Oh god, that's a horrible reality. Anyway, air nomads. So, every time I get too upset thinking about the state of affairs, I'm just going to roll into another topic.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can also have nomads in the air, in space. So you've got similar problems: air piracy, cargo needing to be transported, passenger transport, aircraft protection, smuggling, and combat support, which would be a huge boon to any corp or any edge runner to literally bring in the air support, and have kind of topographical fighting, or, with there's also a lot more opportunities of like maybe you're a med tech and you're going to do like a search rescue party kind of thing. Med techs usually have their little hovery thingies too. But think on a grander scale. Yeah, if you needed to find someone, in our society we have search and rescue teams. So maybe there's a whole kind of nomad, like, non-profit thing that is devoted to that, to kind of like combing those areas and getting a good kind of side of that.
I like that a lot. And VBB in there in the chat once again says, I think one of my favorite things about the nomads is that they have that level of organization behind them, unlike most of the other classes. And I got to agree 100%. I think, like, when Ellen tapped into that whole mafia vibe to it, when you think about the multiple blood families, it totally has that vibe. Very organized families. It's just maybe not as mafia based when you think of, like, crime syndicate. They're more, obviously, in Red, more noble. They're more about transportation, cargo, those sort of things. And if you think outside the box, search and rescue and these other ideas we've been putting out, but absolutely organized. I think that's a great thing to mention. Yeah, and then he says air pirates. Absolutely, in Cyberpunk, there's going to be sea pirates, just like in the land. You got Raph and Shiv attacking cargoes, and in the air, there's going to be air pirates. I love that idea.
Well, wherever there's goods,
somebody wants
stuff.
them.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just kind of like a sad fact of when something's commodified. It's like there's always then going to be people who are like, great, I need to make a living. I will just steal, and especially if it's from the corp, you don't feel that bad about it.
Exactly. I mean, look what they just did during the Fourth Corporate War, causing all that shit. That had nothing to do with Johnny. Don't mention that. But all the corpse. Fuck the corpse, right?
Johnny needs to grow up. I'll say it. Even if my mum does have the hots for Keanu Reeves.
Hell yeah. Oh, and Robert Table's organized and loyal in complex ways. Lots of room for social conflicts, ethical dilemmas, backstabbing, retribution, etc. Great way to put that, Robert. I think that absolutely, like, organized and loyal in complex ways. Yeah.
Wherever there is community, there's always conflict, right? Because you're never just like, yeah, cool, these are my people. Even in your blood family, there is constant, like, flux of conflict and when to back down from a fight. What if you were a nomad who wanted to branch off to start your own gang, or conversely to join another? There's a lot of kind of interplay that you can do. You could even have, like, I've never done it, but you could even do, like, a whole party that is just nomads.
I've never done it. Yeah, I've never, in all the years of GMing and playing, like, I've never had a team of, just lawmen or just nomads or just solos or just whatever. But I do really like that idea, and nomads seems like an easy one to kind of jump into if you were going to do that, because it makes perfect sense. Like, that would be your family, that would be your pack,
Yeah, and also, like, nomads, they're not all drivers. You can't all be driving the car at the same time. They need to. It's kind of like kind of circling back, but as well adding ideas into the mix. Air, also rockets and space travel. Like, it kind of got the different kind of space colonies kind of did get cut off with the rebellion. I can't remember if that's in the gap between 2020 and Red, isn't it? Like, the colonies that was started in Red, basically with slave labor, have been like, hey, F you, it's ours now, which is very cool. But also, like, if they still have some people, some guys on the ground to kind of rockets, we've seen from, hate to give him any kind of praise whatsoever, but, like, Elon Musk has sent rockets up into the air. So it's like, if you have a lot of money and a lot of resources, then it's not that hard.
Exactly.
So it's don't forget about space travel.
Right.
That could be a
and
really
with nomads,
cool
like,
campaign.
Yeah, and when we talk about the group, like you said, that, not all of them are just drivers or whatever. That's one thing I love about nomads, is that they kind of have that dynamic. A few roles have that. I mentioned that in deep dives, but not all of them. But nomads is kind of one of those ones, and I'll elaborate more on it when we talk about archetypes and recommended skills and stats. But they're just one of those ones where it's like, yeah, they're going to need a little bit of tech because they've got all that drive, land, and sea vehicle tech. Yeah, they drive, so you want to give them a little bit of possible reflex, dexterity, or things like that, depending on how you're going to play them in combat. But they can play any direction, any which way. It's not like that defines their job. Like, yeah, it's travel, it's convoy, it's supply chains. But if you had a team of them, it's like maybe one specializes in paramedics and first aid stuff, whereas this one's all about combat. This one is all about driving and fixing the vehicles, while this one does all the talking and networking, So it's like, I don't know, nomads, they're one of those ones where they can go in any direction and still be considered a nomad. I like it a lot.
Yeah, because it's like people who, astronauts. I found this out recently by watching one of those, like, I forget what they called, like the master classes kind of thing.
Yeah.
With a real life astronaut. It was just so cool. And it was like a fact that totally blew me, which is like, yeah, astronauts need to know how to do everything. They need to do competent first aid and also a bit of medical training. They need to do a lot of engineering, because once you're in the air, you need to be able, every single person needs to be able to fill any gap possible. So it's like, sure, the nomads aren't that cut off from society, but if you're on the road for long stretches of time, if you're driving for 3 days straight without being able to see any other kind of, resources around, then you're going to need meds, you're going to need engineers, You're going to need chefs, you're going to need probably some form of entertainment or intimacy, or, people need those things, and nomads are no different. They just travel,
Yeah.
So it's a really, really cool aspect. So we've kind of talked about that a little bit, but then once you figure out what medium your nomads operate on, what they do as a group, then what are you? How do you figure out into this little family? With Sprocket, my Cyberpunk Red character from Feed the Beast, my nomad, she comes from a traveling circus, but the thing about her is she's really awkward, and I gave her like a dump stat. Cool was her dump stat, so she had a cool of like 2. So she's too exuberant to lie or do a lot of those social things. She kind of like gets tumbled up in her words, puts her foot in her mouth a lot. And as a stage performer, she doesn't have that kind of presence, or she's not cut out for it. So as a result, the traveling Volkov circus, they leave her to do a lot of the kind of, she spends her time doing a lot of fixing the cars, a lot of kind of driving out and hanging back, and maybe doing a little bit of protecting, and those kind of other skills required to kind of keep the family running. There's also like other skills that come in there that I gave that because the great thing about being a nomad is you've got a lot of resources to learn from. So if you were to pick weird skills, a nomad is a perfect place, to look at it from, because think of all the people that you would travel with, but then also the different people you would meet in your travels.
Exactly. You pick up random skills and things, like you can make it work, like on the player side, not character side, like, you like to have it make sense, what your character has skills with, you give it backstory and all that. And like you said, nomads, they have so much opportunity to do almost anything you can think of, because they do run into so many people and places and things like.
Yeah. And so, for Sprocket, sometimes she would be like a little Annie Oakley, and that's why like her gun skill is really good, like for using it in the show, because she's like, I can't do a big performance thing, and they're like, yeah, but you're good at shooting, so I don't know, maybe shoot this apple off someone's head. And she'd be like, and she learned animal handling because in a circus someone knew how to they had like a little dog show almost, and she learned not karate, she learned aikido from someone who kind of came in and did a lot of choreography for the troupe. So it's just like
nice.
there's a lot of scope there. So, figure out who you are in your pack. Are you the talker? Are you the kind of person who goes out ahead? That's like your scout. Are you someone who hangs back, protect the family? You're the weapons kind of person. You're the muscle. Are you just a really good driver? Are you the one who's mostly behind the wheel? Or if you get into sticky situations where you need like a lot of evasive driving or aggressive driving, they kind of tap you in. Are you a smuggler? Do you get stuff that the group needs? And similarly, procurement. Yeah, a lot of probably it's probably like a lot of retail, right? You're mainly in the back filling out forms, going over stock take of what's left in the vans.
Yeah, like you pick procurement, and the campaigns are just boring as hell. You're like clocking in, you're like taking inventory. You're like, Jesus,
Yeah.
3 hours the GM made me take inventory. It was boring as hell. I don't know what I'm doing here, why I'm here. Like, that would be awesome. And also shout out to Leaded Coffee, by the way, before it gets too far in, for all those gifted subs. That was awesome. Thank you so much. He's a supporter on Patreon. He's just a great part of the community. He's on the Cyberpunk Uncensored Discord, and he's always contributing and stuff. I really appreciate that. That was awesome. And Robert Tables had a question for Ellen. We're gonna do questions at the end, but I also don't want to lose any as well. So let's hit this before we move on with the rest of the life path. It says, Ellen, so far, are there any aspects of playing a nomad that you initially didn't like, or advice for others that may be second guessing the role?
I guess like I had reservations about nomads in 2020 because I was like, it really doesn't feel like as a nomad why you would kind of, there seems to be a lot of kind of mental gymnastics of like why you alone would be away from your pack,
Right.
slumming it with some edgelords or helping them on whatever they've got to do, because a lot of 2020 stories are so centered about Night City, and for nomads it's like, why the fuck would I care what petty revenge or whatever that you have to do in Night City in a place that does not really factor in to my life, which is it's not a bad thing. That means that you can have a really complicated backstory, or
exactly. And correct me if I'm wrong, and everybody in chat, I think you can vouch, anybody from the old 2020 days back in the day, you would always be a nomad and play that shit like Mad Max, so to speak, even though that's even though that's technically like lawman multi-classing into nomad a bit there, but you get my point, is like you would always play it like that loner, you're away from your family in the Badlands, and you're coming to the city just looking to make money or do whatever the reasoning. But yeah, it was a little bit, you kind of did have to do some mental gymnastics to have that make sense. I think Red, with that individual life path stuff, it's so perfect. It makes sense.
And also with Red, how much more integrated nomads are into society is a lot more helpful for backstory, certainly. But yeah, I would say just go for it. Like, go for whatever idea excites you most. Like, I think that's general good advice for any role-playing games. Sometimes you have to be a bit considerate of like what other characters are doing, so you can kind of make a cohesive unit. But especially with Artelzorian games, go for a role. If you say, okay, I want to experiment playing a nomad, straight up roll for it, because that's what I do with a lot of my characters. Sometimes I will tweak it because we are trying to make a kind of dramatic, full series with a character arc and that kind of stuff. So we will sometimes tweak it and not go directly from roles. But with Sprocket, a lot of her stuff I did roll in the life path, and that gives you a lot of really tasty inconsistencies that you can kind of go, oh, well, I rolled that my character's like a loner, but then also has like, 5 or 10 siblings. So that's really interesting. Like, what happened there that now this person is a loner? Was it tragic? Was it, did they get iced or something? Or was it a disagreement? They were going down a different path and you're moved on. Or maybe you just go, this is not the life for me. I want to try and make it somewhere else. So lean into, have fun, see what you roll, see the fun things that you roll. But then after that, you might realize, oh, actually, I think it would be fun to play a land nomad, or all those
Oh,
kind of things.
100%. And I think that's a great point too, is like if somebody's, second guessing diving into a role and how you want to play it, yeah, just roll out the life path and see where it takes you, and you
Yeah.
can always change it, make it your own. One thing that I've done with players in the past, sometimes I do this, I'll say, you can either roll or choose parts of the life path. Sometimes I'll say, hey, roll twice for each section and just pick which one of the two. That way it's a little bit of chance, a little bit of choice. It's not fully choosing it. It's not fully chance. You at least get two options. You rolled both of them. I don't know. So have fun with it. I think Ellen put it well. Just dive in, roll the different sections and see where it puts your character, and then try to have fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we have our pack's overall philosophy, which is really, really interesting. That's where we get into the moral quandaries, or how you want to approach the characterization, and kind of like motivation if you go from like an actor's standpoint of who your people are, where you come from. So you've got one, always working for good. Your pack accepts others. You just want to get along. So that's a very like altruistic kind of really accepting, which is very nice of the nomads, I must say, after 2020 and after kind of being on the edge. You've got some people who really are out there to be like, nah, we're a found family. We all found each other on the road, and that's how we became strong. So we're happy to welcome others into the fold. You could also get, if you're a character, you could be totally more multi-classed going into that, because you could be like, I was a corp, but they accepted me, so there's a lot of fun things there you can do. Number 2, it's more like a family business, operates as a fair and honest concern. So we kind of, they're not super altruistic. They're not like hoping to like accept everyone. They are a family. They'll be nice and fair, but also if you cross them, then that's on you, because they were fair.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. 3 will occasionally slip and do unethical things, but it's rare. So you're moving more into kind of grayer territory. 4, willing to bend the rules whenever they get in the way to get what the pack needs. Family first, right? So if you need to ice some other smaller gangs, or if you need to kind of raid a little community and like steal some of their supplies, or even that's where piracy and stuff comes in,
I also think it's kind of fun too.
It's my pack.
Is like how it goes. Obviously, the beginning is like the more fair and just and honest, and then it gets into the gray area. Then obviously you'll mention the next two. It gets more and more like they're bending the rules now. They're just kind of ruthless and fucking shit up. But I think a fun way to look at that stuff too is like that's the pack's overall philosophy. So yeah, you're part of the pack, but how fun would it be that like you're fitting into this honest, fair family business, but maybe individually you're a nomad that's like, well, behind the curtains, I bend the rules. I just don't tell my family, but I'm doing what's best for the family.
Yeah.
Or the opposite, they're all doing illegal shit, and behind the thing, like, they're robbing a place, and as they're leaving, you're like, shit, let me just leave like 100 eddies on the table for the shit that we stole.
I don't feel good about
and they don't see it, and like, I don't know, it might be kind of fun to play your individual morality conflicting or contrasting to the overall pack philosophy. I kind of like that idea. But go on, I don't want to interrupt too much. I just wanted to interject.
Oh, no, that's all good. Like, I was just kind of thinking about Sprocket as an example. Like, her family is too. It's more like a family business. Like, they're very fair and honest. But it still is a business, They operate, they have their schedule. Her father and mother, they keep things running. They're quite relentless about, okay, morning, warm-up time, rehearsal, we need to go over their acts, we need to blah, 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 blah. And while they're very loving, Sprocket, as not a performer, is kind of like, I don't fit in here a little bit. She wants to do proud by them, but obviously she's like, this isn't kind of her calling. So the reason that she ends up, where we start off in Feed the Beast, in this little anarchist community heaven, is because she wants to go and try and find where she belongs. So, it's a lot of great storytelling basis, and similar for there was a previous nomad from that pack, Brunhilde, who was like the strong woman in the circus. She got old, like, you know, she did her back, stuff like that. It's just like she wants to kind of put up steps, and so that's how she found heaven too. So there's a lot of great backstory stuff that comes from philosophy in general, because Cyberpunk's such a philosophical game. Then we have the kind of more, we said we're inching back, like from black and white into grey, further into grey. We have 5 ruthless and self-centered, willing to do some bad things if it will get the pack ahead. I think that kind of speaks for itself, right? Yeah. And 6, totally evil. You rage up and down the highways, killing, looting, and just terrorizing everyone.
Getting crazy right there. To me, that's almost like Raph and Shiv territory. Like you're just,
yeah, I was gonna say like Raph and Shiv.
Yeah, like you're raging down the highways. It's crazy. And yeah, shout out to Vampire Bites for the sub, Let It Coffee for the chair. I appreciate all y'all. But yeah, it's kind of crazy, and I don't like thinking of nomads that way, but I appreciate the spectrum that they're giving you there, you know, leading from good guys all the way to almost evil, you know, and everything in between. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's how the character's played. It might be more interesting that that's the pack philosophy, but you're kind of opposite. You're like, fuck, you know, I don't like raging up and down the highways and looting and killing people and shit. But it's my family. What can I do? You know, I'm making the best of it. I'm gonna get out of this in a minute. But yeah.
And also you think about, you know, how do they get new recruits? Like, is it a kind of Star Wars new trilogy, kind of like how the First Order operates? Well, obviously you're not going to be able to recruit people to being stormtroopers. They're evil. Right. They're space Nazis. I'm not going to be like, you know, they are space Nazis, but their medical benefits are pretty good. You know what? I'll take the job. Like you're not going to get... They got great
dental.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to get people who know both sides of the thing to join on. So what do? They go raising and they take children. And then they basically recruit them. So, you know, that could be a great backstory for a nomad who was kind of like, I never knew, because that was all I knew. You know, they took me and I've been indoctrinated. But then you've also got to think about, why do they do these things? You know, in Cyberpunk, no one's just like straight up evil. You know, It's all very human. Why do they go around just like setting everything on fire? Is there a kind of like, you know, us or them mentality? Is it revenge? Is it kind of, you know, so that no one follows them? Are they like a cult almost? Have they been manipulated by this kind of cult
or a bit
leader?
of a bit of a defense system, like taking an offense is the best defense. Like they're just precautionary, but they're being fucked up in their mythology. You know, how they pull it off, you know.
Yeah, it's almost like Reavers, you know. Have they just snapped? I don't like to kind of delve into that, because it's like, you know, as someone with a mental illness, I'm like, when I snapped, I just kind of like didn't get out of bed. I didn't go around razing villagers to the ground.
Right.
But, you know, it's that kind of thing of like, you realize there's nothing more, you know, so you want to rage against the machine, but, you know, who do you hurt in the process?
Yeah, and like a
kind of thing.
Persona Minor says that struggle to maintain humanity in the world of Red is one of the best role-playing features of Cyberpunk Red. I agree. I think that even though it's recommended, keep it on a street level. You don't want, no edgerunners are trying to be world heroes. We're going to save the world and save everything. Like it's not a Marvel role-playing game or like some epic like fantasy thing. It's very street level, and it involves a lot of survival, whatever aspect, in your role play you're going to do. It always seems to come down to survival or defending yourself or something along those lines. But I do agree. I think that struggle to maintain humanity, especially when you have things like cyberpsychosis and other things beyond morality, I think it's really interesting, and I think that it's a fun take to have because the city is just inherently just fucked up.
Yeah.
It's the dystopian future. So if you're going to be one of the few that's like, well, I'm trying to feed homeless and care for people and do the right thing, and it's like it's few and far in between. So it's going to be a rough ride, and I think that's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And just as we're kind of like moving away from philosophy, you got to remember like a lot of the mooks that you see in Cyberpunk, they have a philosophy, you know. So we talk about Raph and Shiv and stuff. It's like, yeah, you know, they are written as pretty evil, but also we don't know. You know, one
Right.
thing that I remember Phil talked about when he was kind of talking about GMing is that especially in our cyberpunk campaigns, he usually gave the people names when he was describing, you know, our mooks that we were going up against, because it's like, you know, they generally fall on the 3 to 6 kind of thing, of, hey, people got to eat, and
Yeah, they're doing a job, you know.
it's that kind of struggle, and maybe, you know, what do we look like from the Raph and Shiv perspective as well? It's quite interesting of like, no one really thinks that they're that evil. So
Right.
how do you kind of twist your villain's morality in a way that makes them really compelling and stuff? Um, but with a gang and with doing shit in Cyberpunk, you generally also make enemies. Yay! So,
Nice
who
transition.
is thanks? Who is gunning for your pack? You've got someone. No one makes it this long in Cyberpunk without making enemies. So you've got organized crime, booster gangs, drug runners, dirty politicians, rival packs in the same business, and dirty cops. I mean,
I like how
it's Cyberpunk,
it's
baby.
all yeah, it's dirty politicians, drug runners, dirty
Yeah.
cops, rival packs in the same business. What I would like to see though is just as they kind of hit that spectrum on philosophy, and I was suggesting like, you know, playing your character the opposite of pack philosophy, whether good or bad, and maybe you're the opposite end of the spectrum. I feel like that should have been in there in the gunning. They should have had like it's not always dirty politicians. Maybe you're maybe your pack philosophy is some of that evil shit, and it's actually
Yep.
a good politician. It's like I want to end these people that are, you know, raising hell on the highways, and you know, so
Yeah.
they kind of fumbled that a little, Art story, and I feel like, you know, they hit that spectrum. They gave a broad option sort of thing on the philosophy. Then when they went to gunning, it's like they forgot the fact that you could be evil. They just made everyone that's gunning for you kind of evil, and that I don't like that
Yeah.
too much. With the exception of rival packs in the same business, because
Yeah.
that could just be competition, so it's not necessarily evil after you. But again, like I said, it would have been nice that they had a couple good options, or they put in there dirty, you know, or
Or just
clean
politicians.
politician, or well, I think just politician is dirty, right? So it'd have
Well,
to.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say
it
it
would have
doesn't
to.
need the prefix.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't really.
But you get my point. You get my point. I feel like there should have been
Yeah.
some good things there because you do have the option to have the bad guy philosophy in your pack. So
Maybe they're trying to steer people away from just being outright murder hobos.
we'll
They're
go
trying
with
to like
that.
drop the hint that like, but maybe don't play as a murder hobo,
Yeah.
because no one wants to play with a murder hobo.
Right.
Okay, I'll say it. I don't like to play with a murder hobo. But yeah, I suppose, and I think it's up to the player as well of like how you want to twist that. You know, how do they see you? How do you see them? If they're your enemies, you're probably gonna say, yeah, F those guys. They're evil, they're bad. They're the baddies. It's also I didn't roll it for the Volkovs, but like if you were an entertainment group, I love the idea of a war between two
Yeah, yeah.
traveling entertainment groups and just
I
like
like that. Yeah, yeah. Oh, and it could
oh
even be
no.
like an almost battle of the bands at one point. It could be like some
Yeah.
big epic event where it's like battle of the circuses or something crazy.
You
You
could
know?
absolutely do Scott Pilgrim versus the World,
Yeah.
Cyberpunk Red.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's correct. That's how you play the game. Well done. You did it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that
But hey-
is the life path.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we nailed the life path. Great job, Ellen. Great job, everybody in chat for contributing ideas. We're gonna move on to archetypes now. However, I do want to mention anybody in chat, if all of a sudden something pops in your head that has to do with life path, feel free to put it in chat. We have no problem backtracking ideas and bouncing around with ideas. I think it's more important that we get all the ideas out and we make this episode as deep of a dive as it can be. So that being said, let's get into archetypes at least here. You know, I'll let you kind of talk about some of the archetypes. I made a list here of just some concepts and ideas that I have here, but I do want to start it off a little bit with the fact that nomads are all about vehicles. It's built into their role ability. So no matter what they're going to have something to do with vehicles, right? They have the options because of the family with getting transport, with doing all these modifications to them. And again, anybody interested in learning about the roll abilities and some of the mechanics and crunch behind all this, check out the Cyberpunk Red Crash Course and the Cyberpunk Uncensored YouTube
this ain't
channel.
Gonna be crunchy.
Exactly. I don't want to get into that, but that being said, I do want to mention, like, you know, obviously the first thing you think about with nomads is like driving and or fixing. You know, they're either a driver or they're a mechanic. That's the first thing you think about with nomads, at least during time of red. That's what they have going for them. But obviously, there's so many different ways that you can play a nomad. I've got some things to say about it, but I wanted to let you kind of. You know, if you've got any ideas for archetypes or any things to comment about that, to take the mic first.
I'm just laughing at the chat of a nomad family of carnies, which you can roll in the life path, totally. The Great Night City Bake Off.
Wow. I love that.
Love that. And Persona Miner says Ferris wheel and tilt wheels are vehicles. Absolutely.
That's funny.
If you're a carnivore, then you probably have roller coasters, and I would love to see what kind of roller coasters people would make up in Cyberpunk Red. And if you could just drive them, that would be, oh my god, you could have a shootout while someone's driving the Ferris wheel around, and
it's
the
rolling.
Ferris wheel is going, and you're like, oh my god, I gotta wait.
I'm gonna throw up.
Sorry. Yeah.
I'm gonna throw up.
Do it on the next circle, so then you end up
coming around again. Oh god.
Yeah. Oh god. Anyway, on to archetypes. So you've got a lot of kind of like inspiration from media. Of course, driving is like a huge one. Are they kind of like a speed demon, you know? Someone who lives kind of for the car. It's almost like the steering wheel is just like an extension of their car. Do they like treat their car like their baby, you know? Like, is it as well with the nomad family? It's a pool, right? It's a motor pool. So you share your cars and vehicles. So it's like, you know, who does that car belong to that you're driving? Because that will also give you some flavor. Is like your car like your baby, your precious, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And do you associate more with that car than you do other people? So you've got that kind of like that kind of car rev head speed junkie kind of thing where it's all about the car. Then you've also got like engineering and mechanics. So you've got like your grease monkey, you know, are they the kind of regular fixer? You know, you can always find them under a car covered in grease, you know, maybe they're a bit more blue collar and stuff, because you know it's a dirty job, but someone's gonna do it. You know, so a lot of kind of tech resources. You've obviously got your gunner, your person who's always at the turrets or who's ready to shoot out of a window, who's ready to kind of, you know, hop onto the top of the truck, run down, punch someone off.
Yep.
And I don't know, flip into the back window or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I think that really plays into the, you know, the type of nomad that you want to play, you know, because the fact that they're into vehicles, whether a driver or a mechanic, the fact that it's family oriented, whether blood or by convenience or work or whatever, it's still pack oriented, I should say. And within that, you know, you look at the transportation as, do they have that hunter-gatherer vibe? Or is it like that scaver vibe almost, but like a little more noble because they're out hunting and gathering, so to speak? Are they more of an explorer, you know? And then, like I mentioned before, I don't want to dive too much, but I had in my notes, you know, family or alone. And I think, you know, I mentioned that earlier in the life path stuff. I think it could play into the conflicting philosophy of the nomad versus the pack philosophy that could kind of play into being alone, which again has that 2020 vibe, which as a movie example, the whole Mad Max thing.
Well, yeah.
Great example.
Also, like, which Mad Max, you know, as well.
Exactly.
The Fury Road kind of leans into that together, you know, together makes us strong. That, you know, you have someone who, Furiosa is the driver, but also she is kind of protection and,
right.
You know, but then that's...
But look at the originals, too. He's like I said, it's almost like a lawman
He starts as a lawman, yeah.
multi-classing into a nomad by, Mad Max Beyond
Charging my
Thunderdome,
laptop.
and like as he's going, it's all of a sudden it's less, trying to be the moral upbringing and protect the highways, and more into like the travel and survival aspect of him. And I think that kind of played into the 2020 vibe of a nomad, really. But again, like I said, when it comes to archetypes, I think it's important to think of that, and it can play into, like I said, the philosophy, and whether you're aligning with it or conflicting with the pack philosophy. And when I think of like soloists aside from Mad Max, a couple others that came to mind, and they don't have to be real.
Like Drive.
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
With
See, I was thinking
Ryan Gosling. Yeah.
Ryan Gosling. I was thinking on the Explorer side. It's kind of random, but like Dora the Explorer or like Johnny Appleseed, like random lore things from like real stuff. But it totally fits that sort of hunter-gatherer or traveling or explorer vibe to it.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say with I'm not an authority on any of these topics, so I kind of trepidatiously tiptoe around it, but the word nomad is like people who travel. There were a lot of nomadic cultures pre a lot of colonialization. Yeah, nailed it.
Yeah.
Yes. So like, I mean, looking at Australia, a lot of the indigenous communities that we had, people say like, oh, Australia is lots of nothing. And that's not true, because traditionally people would move through. A lot of the different peoples of Australia didn't settle in one place, because that's not how the land works. So a lot of nomadic cultures, as they would move through places, would be planting seeds or trimming that, knowing that once they come back for the next season, that would kind of bear fruit. So it's not kind of in the life path, but also if you wanted to do kind of more agriculture, I know they talk about farmers,
right.
But just in kind of like general agriculture.
That's where the Jodes nomads came from. They were heavily into agriculture and got pushed out by the corps and became nomads by necessity. But I love that you mentioned nomadic tribes. Just that wording, I think, sounds great for when you think of that aspect of nomads. But go on.
And also, like, an example is the Romani people. That's an example that more people might be more familiar as with a lot of indigenous peoples of certain countries and nations.
Look at like gypsies or pilgrims. When you think of like cultural nomadic tribes.
Yeah. And the Romani still exist today, and kind of moving around and not settling is part of their culture and part of their lifestyle. So, you got to think about how much of, with archetypes, are your nomads a culture, or are they a job?
Great point.
Or are they kind of a mishmash of peoples? You've got that found family aspect that you find in a lot of those kind of mediums, or are they a traditional family, or are they people doing a job employed by someone or other?
And that made me think too, when I mentioned the nomadic tribes, like thinking of like pilgrims, right? Like a pilgrimage, so to speak. Like imagine like the convoy or the transport of like a nomad tribe, but like they're not, their goods or whatever are like the knowledge of their religion or their philosophy. So maybe like you could take a nomadic tribe on a totally different tangent than what you're thinking of when it comes to selling and buying goods. Maybe it's more of like the philosophy of, of the tribe, and it could almost be like a pilgrimage in a sense. It's really interesting. Yeah. And before I get too far away in the chat, Vampire Bites mentioned Tank Girl. Absolutely love Tank Girl. I own all the comic books, the movie, all that stuff. Great example of like a nomad, maybe multi-classing solo-esque because of all the combat fight, but totally nomad, like living in the wastelands, anti-corp, the pack mentality. Great example. I love Tank Girl. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. I love Tank Girl so much.
Yeah. Oh, me too. I even like the movie. I know.
Me too. Oh, absolutely.
Flawed, but I still love it.
Whatever. I love Tank Girl. I don't care.
Art is subjective, losers. I just need a shirt that says art is subjective, losers. Because I'm so sick of just like, every time there's like media out there, like even the Cyberpunk 2077, and I'll admit it wasn't a game for me, because if a world is too open in a video game, then I don't accomplish anything.
You just walk around looking at
so-
everything. You're like, oh, look at that.
Yeah. I literally, like, I was like, I haven't even finished the tutorial. I just spent 20 minutes walking after, like, NPCs. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's a cute outfit. I love that. Or just, like, looking around. And as a result, I finished just the tutorial. And I haven't gone back to play the game because it gives me anxiety. Because I'm like, it's too much. I can't do it.
Hey, DM Brando cheered that too, and that's Brandon who plays with us in the weekly Sirenscape. He plays Rush, the fixer, with that Texas Southern charm.
Eloquent fixer,
very
the
eloquent.
one we all adore.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you made it, Brandon.
Yes, lovely. But just like with that whole debate, I was like, oh, must we all have a take? I'm weary. I'm weary of discussing pop culture, and that's my job, you know. So yeah, sorry, that was a big tangent. I can't remember what we were talking about. Tank Girl, artist subjective.
We love Tank. Yeah, we love
I'm
Tank
back
Girl.
on track.
All right, let's get back to Cyberpunk.
Back on track. Yeah, we did a few detours.
Yeah.
But hey, that's the scenic route.
And the last thing I want to mention, unless there's anything else somebody wants to interject, but the one of my last things I wanted to mention about the archetypes, and I've mentioned this on past deep dive episodes, is after you get through these philosophies, the morality, how you're going to play it. That define the archetype of your character. The other thing to kind of help direct that if you're confused, or give it a foundation to work on either prior or post to deciding the archetype, is, are you pro-corp or anti-corp? Are you pro-gang or anti-gang? And that can play into the philosophy aspect like I mentioned before. But I think it's important to kind of think of that, because those are huge aspects of cyberpunk world, and it doesn't matter where or what level, there's all versions of those things. So I think it's kind of fun to think of pro or anti either of that as like a foundation, or at least to give a little bit of direction. But was there anything else on archetypes that we didn't cover? Any other characters? And I'm looking at you, chat, too. I know chat always comes up with great ideas to interject, and we can always backtrack. We can move on to recommended stats and skills, and if something pops in our head about archetypes or something, or life path stuff, we'll throw it out there. We can always backtrack.
I think I've got two things to mention, which is, one is like academia. You'd kind of talked about spreading the word. Like, if they are explorers, or a lot of researchers will have to kind of move out or kind of be constantly roving. I think that might be a cool way of looking at it. Are you a research gang? How does that factor into cyberpunk? You can also then go for like, do some people have to get their education via the roads, the airs, or the seas? Are you a school? Are you a library? Are you a preacher? There's those kind of things of like, you got to think about what we need or what we crave in society, and think about how people would get that in cyberpunk when we don't have the world network anymore. We just have little data pools and stuff, and the nomads are responsible for getting a lot of stuff to and from people. So there's that. And then also, if you are thinking like air or sea, then you might think about hierarchies there with archetypes, because a lot of those structures are kind of by their nature hierarchical, so that they, can have a kind of functioning order. You think the Navy, you think the Air Force.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of stuff. Yeah.
And I want to say bye to Capricious Nature, who is Zach, part of the Cyberpunk Uncensored team. He helps with the Scream Sheet project and all kinds of stuff he helps me with. I really appreciate you. Towards the end of this episode, I was going to give a shout out to all the Patreon supporters. And Zach, Capricious Nature, has joined that recently. So before you leave, I did want to thank you for that, because I am going to thank you later in the video. Hopefully you'll see it in the VOD if you already left. But yeah, thank you. All right, back to Cyberpunk. Hey, there he is. He's awesome.
Yeah, have a good one at Sweet Tilly Bean and at Cyberpunk Uncensored Outdoor 7 Pixel Heart.
If you can dream it and you can play it and you can realize it within the world of Cyberpunk, then the world is your oyster.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be afraid of being like, oh, that's not too cyberpunky, because mundane things still exist in the world of Cyberpunk Red. They are just not as popular as, like, the assassin, the solo, the rocker, So yeah, do what your heart says.
Exactly. Yeah, and you can always put twists on all the roles and things to make it your own. And there is multi-classing, you know, and nothing has to be set in stone. Like as you've seen in previous deep dives and this one, like we can easily put a twist on any one of these life path ideas, or, you know, put a little conflict in it, or, you know, take a hard left turn on any of these ideas, you know. Uh-oh, is it blankie time?
It is, it's so cold.
Well, you're wearing the black tight latex or whatever.
I know.
It looks like that from the front, you know.
Weirdly, this isn't this skin tight, thin top.
Oh, it's not warming?
Very warm.
Oh, that's weird.
Whack.
All right, let's get into recommended stats and skills. I mentioned it earlier. For me, I think it's obvious. You know, every role, you know, has a role ability that somewhat coincides with a particular stat. It usually leans towards that, and I feel like it's obvious a nomad leans into tech because of having the whole, you know, drive and fixing. You know, they've got land and sea and air vehicle tech. So that's one to lean into. But that being said, I think the fact that a lot of them can lean towards the mechanic side of a nomad, it's one of those roles, just like I said with the med tech thing, where I would recommend luck. You know, normally I think luck is kind of a throwaway, like, if you want some luck or you don't want luck, it's up to you how you play, if you remember to use it or not or whatever. But I do think that there are some roles where it's like, man, you might be in a sticky situation where you're trying to fix something. And that leans into one of my recommended skills, which is deduction. Usually you don't think about that too much with a nomad, but I think it could come in handy if something's not working on the vehicle and you need to fix it or pull some tech on it. But again, I think luck is kind of a fun one. So for me, I think with a nomad, recommended stats, tech and luck. Obviously, reflex. And then if you're playing into reflex, whether with driving, fighting style stuff, it's like, man, if you have an 8 reflex, do you put a little bit into dex? Because once you have that 8 reflex, you can evade combat. Even if you're not trying to be a combative nomad, do you want to be able to evade people trying to throw some combat at you? So if you have that reflex evader higher, are you going to put some into dex so you can evade? So those are my thoughts on recommended stats. What do you think about stats when you think of a nomad?
I mean, traditionally, and as well, there's kind of 2 ways that you can do it. You can kind of think about it from a meta level of, what does my game need? You know, and what does my story need? And also what's going to be good to play and survive. But also the great thing about role-playing games is you can really throw caution to the wind. And, you know, you could have a nomad who is only good at driving, you know, so maybe they've got like, you know, really high reflexes and dexterity. But you've put like no skills into learning how to weapon, you know, because why would you? You've always got 2 hands on the wheel. And if there's a shootout, it's not you the one who's doing the shooting, you know. You can totally customize that. It just depends on the difficulty of you know, immersing yourself in the role that you personally want to encounter. Like maybe you're doing a one shot and you think, fuck it, like let's just go for the real world building, role playing of it. And I'm a nomad who is the driver. They're the best driver. Like, you know, people only know me as the driver kind of thing. So I'm gonna do high reflex, high dex, but maybe they don't do the fixing. Maybe part of their pack, they have a great engineer, and maybe they, you know, so you use the rest as kind of dump stats, and that can get you into fun, tricky situations where your car's fucked. Like, oh no.
And I like that you mentioned the metagaming, you know, side to when you think about stats. Like, are you thinking of the team and other characters and how you fit in and make a well-rounded team so you can have good missions and gameplay and stuff? And as a GM, that is kind of the one time I don't mind metagaming. I don't like when players will discuss with each other the exact weapons or cybernetics they have, but I don't mind if someone's like, hey, like, I lean more towards like, you know, cyber audio suite. Like, I'm not going to get into specifics of it, but I got ears covered if somebody else wants to have like eyes and be like night vision aspect, because I'm not good with that. Or I really lean towards, you know, speaking and negotiating and stuff as a fixer or media or this or that. But I'm not good at combat. Is someone else going to handle combat? And like someone else will chime in like, oh no, I'm good with this. And like, I don't mind metagaming when it comes to that initial stat and team setup. But I can also, as a GM, I've seen it none of that, and it lead to a weird situation that ends up kind of fun, where it's like, oh my god, everybody has everyone
Same
has
skills.
that can hear really well and can lip read, and like everyone's really good at that, but no one can see in the dark. Oh my god, you guys just went to a dark situation and no one has night vision. Okay, this could be fun, this could be weird. So I like it both ways.
Well, and as well, like, just to kind of peer behind the curtain, with Roll to Cast, that's kind of a thing that we do with our, like, even pre-episode zeros, we kind of come in with, like, we decide kind of what our next game should be, and then we kind of have a talk about, like, just throughout the next kind of few meetings, we kind of go, I have an idea about this kind of character, so we don't go into the depths too much, but we kind of, like, for Cyberpunk, I know that, I can't remember who was set, like, on their character first, but I think we knew that we were going to have a netrunner, and a kind of fixer, and I was like, oh, I kind of feel like I want to be the muscle this time around. So we kind of have that kind of general meeting. Like, you don't want to go into it too in deep, but there's definitely, like, we'll throw it on the group chat of, like, hey, I'm doing, like, a really combat heavy character. Do other people have are settling on that as well? Or I'm happy to change.
Yeah, is anybody going to be able to speak for the team? Like, do I need to get some social skills, or does somebody have that shit covered? I totally agree.
In our Sirenscape game, I was like, yo, can anyone drive, or can I use these other 2 points in something else? Yeah,
and I think it's, there's nothing wrong with going over little things like that. And I do want to mention in chat here, VBB says, the only problem I see with completely dumping combat skills is, what do you do while the rest of the group is fighting? And what you do there is you get creative. That's the point. You don't have combat skills, so you got to lean towards your other skills and creatively use them to help the team or the situation they're in during combat.
Sorry,
so that's
my little light is turning off.
Oh,
okay, that's better.
Okay, I see. But I would say you just got to be creative. If you're not good at combat, but you're in that situation, the team's fighting, maybe you're a net runner and you can quickly hop in. Oh, okay, everyone has night vision. Let me kill all the lights so the enemy that doesn't have night vision is now at a disadvantage. Or you're at tech and you're like, okay, can I jimmy rig some flammable thing to set off the fire suppression foam that's going to now, in that room, give them a negative whatever to be able to shoot into this room or whatever. You get my point. Creatively
Can I drive around? Can I
be a distraction?
Cause some other kind of distraction or diversion and be there in time for the people to, like, literally run into the car.
And I think that can be fun too. I think being a character that maybe isn't combat, savvy, yet you still got to deal with combat situations. I think it forces you to be a creative thinker, and it causes for some really interesting gameplay. So I think that's what you do. There's no problem with dumping combat skills. You just got to be a creative thinker.
Sometimes your skills as well is what kind of character that you're thinking about, despite class and despite all that. So I know I'm just looking at my Sprocket stats. So yeah, I said the whole thing of cool. I literally wanted it to be a very low number because she's a teenager.
Oh, I remember that too when you came to play. Yeah, when you came to play in the one shot as Sprocket, and I forget what the situation was, and you did something, and it just wasn't cool. Like, it wasn't socially right. I can't remember what it was. I wish I could remember. But you had to talk to somebody or something. You're like, oh yeah, and I have like no cool, so it's definitely going to come across awkward.
Yeah, I think I tried to lie maybe, and it was like,
I can't remember.
Actually, she wouldn't be too bad at lying, because while her cool is low, her empathy is quite high. She's got an empathy of 7.
Nice.
So it's like I knew that she was a sweet character, a sweet, like, tough character, but still, she's got a high empathy. She hasn't been worn down by the world that much. She's been pretty protected in her nomad family. So, I put high empathy. I put a low cool because she's a teenager. She's still figuring out, because she literally is so tall and brawny. She's got a body of 8, high reflex, high dex. Obviously a little bit of tech, but not so much. And I gave her 6 luck as well. So
Nice.
Clearly we were thinking the same thing of, like, we're gonna get into trouble.
Oh yeah, exactly. And when speaking of skills, recommended skills, and I know I already dabbled in them when we're talking about stats. You know, all these are kind of in the same conversation, but for me, the ones, obviously the driving, piloting, riding, that sort of thing, if you're going to be that nomad, or the land, sea, air vehicle tech, if you're going to be more on the mechanic versus driver side, or maybe a little bit of both. But then after that, like I said before, deduction. I think that's a great one for a nomad if you're going to be in that mechanic side of things, because when shit breaks on the vehicle, you want to kind of figure it out, you know? And then the other thing, I mentioned this before when I talk about characters. I can't remember which deep dive, but whether you're going to play it as having a little bit of combat or not so much, maybe you're more into the social skills. But I think that if you're going to be into combat, even within that, it's extremely dynamic. You have lots of options. Are you going to be stealthy and into evasion? Are you going to be into more melee up close? Like, I'm only going to fight when it's right in my face and I have to. Or are you going to be in, you know, and that includes maybe martial arts. Or are you going to be more ranged? Like, I don't like to fight, so I keep people away. Like, I throw bullets at people and keep them at a distance. And like, if they get near me, I run, you know? Yeah. So I think you can kind of play into that too. I think a nomad, it can go either way. Like, you know, typically in 2020, you always think nomad, like the Mad Max, you know, they're going to be able to fight too. Like they're like a traveling solo, so to speak, you know. But I think with Red, it just has more options as you see through the life path, and that kind of plays in, to me, how I would rock skills as a nomad. You know, I would decide all those things and then kind of lean into the proper skills to make that character come to life.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think for like other skills, athletics and brawling were quite high from, you know, literally athletics every morning, 6 a.m. Volkov family warm-up time. You know, lift your brothers, here we go. Like, so it's like that kind of stuff. The mainly a lot of heavy weapons and stuff, because it's like in the circus, it's not subtlety.
Oh right, yeah, it's explosions and
and she's never like, prior to joining Heaven, it's not like she was in fights that would like be actual fights, you know. She was doing trick shots and stuff like that, and big displays. So subtlety is not in her forte. So it's heavy stuff. It's auto fire, melee weapon as well. She's got her big circus hammer that, like, pooh, you know. You think of the one that does the skill tester.
Oh yeah.
Drive is an important stat. I feel like we should mention this. I know it's pretty obvious, but be good at put points in drive.
Yeah, like it's, you know, it goes hand in hand with your roll ability, with your family pool of vehicle options. Like, you should at least be able to drive as a nomad, at least a little.
I know your base stats of, like, you know, reflex would probably be high, but you also want a really good, you know, like for drive, I had a base stat of 14, all in all. That's quite good, because you know, once you do evasive stuff, you might need to pass a difficulty of like 18, 20, you know, so you want to put yourself in a good position to be able to do that. I also did, like, language. Street slang is very helpful because you'll be communicating with a lot of people.
Yeah, Robert Tables mentioned that too.
Yeah, and I know I specialize language. I put some points in Russian because it is her family. So.
Well, I think it's extremely important in Cyberpunk. You know, whether you're playing 2020 Red or whatever, like, you're going to come across a lot of different cultures and situations where not everybody is speaking the same language. Like, everybody has that street slang, right? Everyone knows how to at least get by enough with that sort of Night City street slang that goes on in Cyberpunk, you know? But as a GM, many times will I throw in, like, you know, a group of Russians or Japanese, like, whether you're going to see Chinese or Yakuza or the Triads or whoever, there's going to be a moment where, like, they're going to talk about you near you, and if you don't have that language, you don't know what's being said. You know what I mean? So that's going to happen. And before I lose track too much of the chat, Persona Minor mentioned, when we were talking about the combat stuff a moment ago, he said persuasion and intimidation can end a fight before it starts. Great point.
That's true.
Exactly. Great point. And that just backs up what I was saying. Like, you know, if you don't necessarily have to be into combat, you can think outside the box and be creative, you know?
Yeah. I mean, how many, like, corpos and stuff, for example, get their hands dirty?
Oh, exactly.
Like, they don't need to, kind of thing.
No, I'm PWB in chat. And what's up, PWB? He's part of the Cyberpunk Uncensored community and the Discord, and he helps with the Scream Sheet projects and some of the things. But he says, I almost want everyone to have 2 or 3 languages to represent the multiculturalism in 2045. Great point. Exactly. You know, it's a melting pot, you know?
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well because, you know, sure, like, depending on your nomad clan, maybe there's a predominant kind of nationality, but probably not really, right? America already is so multicultural, and then you take it a few decades past where we are now, and it is highly unlikely that anyone will just be like, you know, one language or, you know, having to only interact with people who look like them. So I think that's as a really good point to remember, especially when you're playing role-playing games. And I know, like, we run into that a little bit where it's like Roll2Cast is a group of 4 actors, 4 cis actors, you know, 3 guys, 1 girl, and we're all white. You know, we all have different ethnic backgrounds, but we are all white, you know. So we try and make sure that we're not disrespectful in, you know, we don't want to like necessarily like play someone from a totally different ethnicity from us, but we also want to make sure that our worlds are peopled by real people.
Oh, right. You want representation, you know? And
absolutely. Yeah. So that's a really good point.
No, I agree with you, and there is a fine line and some thin ice that you tread on as a streamer, especially. But being a GM or a player, you're absolutely right. Like, you want to have representation of everything and anything you can think of, and then it's also the future. So you got to think even more. You know, you got to think of things that aren't real yet, so to speak. You know, you're creating this world, and then you're relying on the lore, but you want it to feel real and be immersive. And through that, you know, you got to find that balance where, like, am I doing accents without coming across racist? Am I saying certain things like, I'm not from that culture. Am I getting that right? Let me do a little research first. And like, it is a little bit stressful, and you are kind of walking the line, and it can be a little, you know, some sticky situations. But you always got to remember, it's a game, and it's a role-playing game, and that's part of what a role-playing game is you are going to flex those muscles a little bit. You're gonna push the boundaries a little bit, but that's part of what makes role-playing games so awesome, is that they are so inclusive to everything and anything, and you shouldn't be scared to try to incorporate that. And, you know, if anyone does something a little wrong or something, you know, just talk to them about it. If you watch a stream or you read something or you see something, and like, just be like, oh shit, maybe you didn't know this, but that, or I don't know. Just try to take everything with a grain of salt, and everyone just be nice to each other. And I'm sure no one wants to offend anybody. You know what I mean? So, but that's a great point to make. I don't want to go too much on that tangent, but I thought it was worth mentioning that stuff. You know?
Yeah, just to kind of like cap that, like, as you know, kind of white people, if we are too scared to even talk about representation, then all we're going to have is stories that don't have representation. So sometimes, you know, it's worth making a few mistakes on the way if it opens up the topic, gets people interested in. Yeah, and if it's coming from a good place, you know, always do your research and talk to people. And if you can, like, try and look for diversity, you know, in your playing spaces, but also just don't be afraid to include diversity, because it makes the world go round.
Absolutely. No, and it's funny, VB says that's part of why I went with German, because I have some German in me, so it's the only non-English language I speak, even a little. And yeah, that's another thing, like, you know, you can always, if it's a little uncomfortable to push boundaries too much, you know, work with what you have, you know, like my mom's Portuguese, my wife is Puerto Rican and Dominican, and like I lived in Chihuahua, Mexico for 2.5 years when I was 13 to 14, and like, you know, I can lean into the Spanish side, and I can kind of, I feel comfortable in that realm, but I love pushing other accents and dialects and cultures and things. Obviously it's fun, and I try to do it, you know, but that's a great point, VBB, is, you know, if someone's a little uncomfortable pushing those boundaries, start with what is close to you first, you know, something that you can be a little more comfortable with, and then keep going. But you don't want to, like Ellen said, you don't want to hold back, because then all of a sudden, like, you know, it's boring, and you're doing the opposite of what you're worried about doing by being inclusive. So don't be scared of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if I just want to mention, because we're going on tangents here, and I love that. Don't get me wrong. I will talk about cyberpunk stuff and all this stuff
all day.
Yeah, we'll do a 24-hour stream. I don't give a fuck. But keeping to the theme of deep dive, we rocked the LifePath stuff. I feel like we mentioned a lot of great archetype concepts that also play into LifePath options and things and thinking outside the box. I think the stats and skills we went over and the reasoning behind them and combinations, that was great. I think chat mentioned a lot of great examples there as well. I think we nailed the Nomad deep dive. But that being said, anybody in chat, if there's any last minute questions or things you want to bring up, do it now or forever hold your peace. Let's get all the Nomad ideas out on the table before it's done.
I know one thing that deeply inspires me as a person, because I'm very visual and stuff, the aesthetic. So we did talk about a lot of like influences of like, Mad Max Fury Road, Tank Girl, kind of cultures that move around. I always love thinking of the aesthetic, first and foremost. So, if you're moving around a lot, you're going to need hardy materials, so leathers and furs, if you can get them. Not that there's a lot of creatures around, but like that's the thing. You could have leather or fur jackets like from 1980 to now or even before, because that shit is hardy. It will stay. And it's why a lot of people, you see kind of motorcycle gangs. There's a reason you wear leather as well. If you fall off something, you're going to need protection apart from your skin weave. So think leathers, think furs, think stuff that's worn down, think motocross stuff, helmets, but also all of those things tell a tale, and always people love to accessorize. Like fashion is just a part of our being, and
with sometimes Nomad,
it is necessity, but sometimes it's flavor too.
And like you said, with Nomad, it's gonna have some miles on it. So keep that in mind too. Whatever the style or whatever you're doing with it, depending on the type of Nomad you're playing. But if you are heavily leaning towards the transportation side of Nomad, which is very typical and should be there to some aspect, chances are your clothing is hit miles of dust and dirt and winds and dust storms and some scuffs from road accidents and things you've been through. Just traveling.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I totally got nasal filters for my Nomad, because that dust
that's awesome.
and all sorts of stuff. But then also, how do you recognize your Nomads from a group of others? Do you paint your helmets a different way? Do you, people love to paint the sides of their transports. People love to have a mascot.
Do you have I was going to say, do you have a mascot or some type of like logo thing that everyone has painted on the side of their vehicle, or like a tattoo of or something, That's a great idea. I love that.
So that's the thing that inspires me. So if that's a thing for people to kind of latch onto, absolutely do that. I know we have a question from Robert Tables.
Oh, question for Ellen. Are there any non-cyberpunk genre things that particularly inspire you in your Nomad role? Movies, music, other?
Totally. So for Sprocket, I was mainly inspired by circus and performance and that kind of thing. So I really went kind of deep. I also was lucky enough to go to Russia with some members of my family. So that kind of thing really inspired the accent, really inspired the kind of speech pattern, the characterization, that like actually going to a place and immersing yourself in the culture there can be really great. Obviously don't go anywhere now, but like figure out where your character's from and engage in that kind of side. So I was watching some Russian movies, things like that. I'm a big fan of animation, so I love the film Atlantis, the Disney film, for kind of found family and that kind of ragtag bunch of misfits kind of style. So I totally was inspired a little bit by like that. I'm mostly inspired by comic books, I find, for most series of Roll to Cast. Between, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of all the different ones. I love a lot of comic books, and I know that for Cyberpunk 2020 and a little bit of Red, I was particularly inspired by the comic book adaptation of Danger Days, The True Lives of the Fabulous Killjoys, which is a concept album by My Chemical Romance, which is very Fury Road, very post-apocalypse. They're driving around in a Trans Am in the desert with motocross leggings and painted helmets, and it's colorful and it's wacky and it's very, very stylish. And they also, Gerard Way's a very famous comic book writer, and so he adapted that into a comic book as well called Danger Days. So yeah,
nice.
that was a big 2020 inspiration for me personally. Comic books for me generally, music, and all kinds of movies. There's a pretty general answer, sorry.
Yeah,
but
everything.
There's just so many, everything.
Everything. Have you seen all the things in the world? All the things?
Oh yeah, Furious George said, I feel like the roller derby is really nomadish as well. Yes.
And Rocker Boy.
I played in a roller derby team for about 4 to 5 years. So that kind of style as well, stuff that you can move in. Obviously roller
Turbo
skates,
Kid.
really, really cool. And also that's a form of entertainment.
Yeah.
Is your nomad gang actually just a pack of roller derby skaters?
Yeah.
Love that. Turbo Kid. Yeah,
that's why I said Turbo Kid.
Kid.
Furious George mentioned it in Persona Mine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and earlier in the chat, it got scrolled out, but I do want to backtrack. I think Vampire and somebody else mentioned my 24-hour stream. I talked about that before I went away to film. I was out filming throughout LA and up in Indiana and such for the past month. Because like I mentioned earlier, I'm a filmmaker. I produce, I direct, I do production design, acting, writing, all that good stuff. But prior to leaving, I did mention online I want to run a 24-hour stream for charity. Just running a 24-hour gameplay. Now, whether I cycle in a couple GMs, I trade in players, or it's just a set team with me GMing 24 hours, I don't know how I'm going to pull it off yet. But I want to do it this summer, and that's right around the corner. I want to do it like maybe sometime in July. I'm not sure yet, so I'm running out of time to plan it, but I am planning it. I think Vampire, someone mentioned it in the chat. I do want to say it is still an idea that I have. It's still something I want to do. I'm glad you brought it up because I haven't been thinking about it recently, and I need to start thinking about that because I want to make that plan. I see my beautiful wife, Valerie Mulligan, puts her hand up in the chat. You're definitely in. That'll be an easy one because me and you are always together.
Yeah.
It's
very handy.
Yeah, and thanks for the sub. I know the notifications have been popping up, and I haven't been shouting them out because we just been rocking the nomad ideas, and I didn't want to slow down the pacing with some of these things. But I really appreciate that. Everyone who's given shout outs, cheers, subs, all that stuff. Just to check, no relation to Brennan Mulligan, right? No, not. Nope. There's quite a few Mulligans out there, actors, musicians, directors, stuff like that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, no, I think we rocked the deep dive. I think we covered everything. Owen Renegade says, if you need me, I'm there for the 24-hour stream, I imagine. Hell yeah. I'm going to start organizing that idea. I'll start putting that info out. Before we end this, I do want to give Ellen another moment to kind of plug everything that she has going on and where you can find her and all that stuff. Before we get into that, though, I do want to just say, thanks to all my supporters on Patreon. I mentioned it earlier. Zach, a.k.a. Capricious Nature. Really love the support, man. Seriously appreciate it. Everybody else there on Patreon, William Huddleston and Naomi Madlass, who are playing in my monthly gameplay. That'll be back on the 30th. Anino Gaming, which is part of the Wandering DM play. Leaded Coffee, who also gifted out all those subs during the stream. I really appreciate that. Shout out to you. Big love for you. Michael Edwards, a.k.a. Kira, who I think hopped in the chat kind of late during the stream, said he's going to have to catch it on the VOD. Really appreciate you. Chris Anderson, Dolan Pondsmith. Yep, that's a Pondsmith. She's also an artist. She has a channel on the Cyberpunk Uncensored Discord. You can go look up the Dolan Pondsmith art there and show her some support. Steve Barr from Sirenscape, thanks so much for the support. Matt James, a.k.a. GM Reservoir Panda, who streams for Cyberpunk Uncensored here every Friday and Sunday. Revolver Gray and Samurai Mac. I just wanted to shout out the Patreon supporters and then just remind you, check out all the links in the description. I'm going to put links to Cyberpunk Uncensored, the Discord, our website, Twitch, YouTube. Check out everything I have going on there. I'm also going to put all of Ellen's links there so you can support her. And that being said, Ellen, why don't you take the mic and give yourself a shout out?
Yo. This one's for my people.
Uh-oh.
So thank you. I'll take the mic very vigorously, and I will just say I'm Ellen Graham. I am 1/4 of Baby Beard Media. Our TTRPG podcast, Roll to Cast, that's ROLE, features a different game system each season. Wow, we have done Cyberpunk 2020 and Red. We've done Vampire the Masquerade. We are just wrapping. The finale is out of Pulp Cthulhu, which is our 100th ever episode. We interview the people who made the game. So we've talked to Mike Pondsmith, we've talked to Cody, we've talked to Justin Achille from Vampire Masquerade, and we are interviewing Mike Mason from Chaosium Inc. very, very soon. So check all that out. That's ROLE to cast, especially our next season, Kids on Bikes, because that's the first game I've ever run.
Hey.
And I'd really love your support, and I'd love any critiques or just what you guys think in general. So please check that out. We're on all the things, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, where we have our shows, but then also we do Let's Plays, which releases every single freaking day.
Yep,
So you'll never miss it.
Yeah, PWB asked what system is up next for you guys. What gameplay next? What is?
Oh, Kids on Bikes.
But I think that one you've already recorded, you're releasing.
Oh yes,
what's next in line?
Yes.
I think is what he was asking. Yeah.
We can't drop that. Just
How dare you?
Yet. I know. For that, you gotta give us some cold hard cash on our Patreon.
Yeah.
We won't let the cat out of the bag, but you do have quite a few episodes of Kids on Bikes, A Mystery Down Under, to enjoy before we start to go into pre-production for our next season. So I know you're eager, but you just gotta wait.
Yeah, and just to remind everybody, I'm going to put all the links to Ellen in the description when we VOD this. So everybody, make sure you check that out and go show support to everything she's mentioning.
Fantastic. And then also, I have just done a one-shot of Lady Bluebird with Don't Forget Your Towels podcast. It's very fun. It's an awesome little indie game. So if you want to just kind of have, a one-shot that's super fun, super easy to drop into. It's like a steampunky high adventure in space.
Nice.
I play Lady Bluebird. It's very fun. So that's Don't Forget Your Towel podcast. And also, I'm on the Sirenscape weekly gameplay.
Oh, yeah.
Which you should all know where to find me there. If you don't, what's up?
Yeah,
guys?
anybody watching this live stream or the VOD, if you're not tuning in to the weekly every Thursday Sirenscape gameplay that we're doing with Brandon and Phil and Rocket Fox, then you're missing out. We have a lot of fun. It's really immersive. Everybody really gets into it. Everybody's dressing up, doing accents, just having a fun time. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, if you're not into that, I don't know how to help you.
I don't know.
Yeah, and you can also find me, just me, on Twitter at LNKGraham1. Please engage in my stuff. I want to be Twitter famous. It's the only thing that's keeping me going. I need to buy more dice. I need to keep... Mama needs to keep in dice, so you got to subscribe to me.
Speaking of dice, I do want to mention a little exclusive info. I know I've kind of leaked the info before, and I've mentioned it in Patreon, but Cyberpunk Uncensored is getting ready to launch a Kickstarter. It's also going to be going straight to store directly after, as well as some of the items might not be on Kickstarter. They might only be in store, but we're going to have exclusive Cyberpunk-style dice sets that just look amazing. They're the actual amount of dice that you need, 6 D6s, 2 D10s, and like the case looks like a magazine from a gun. We've got portable collapsing dice towers with different streamer logos on them. I think there's a Roll to Cast one in there. And
Maybe.
And there's going to be some interesting stretch goals too, some fun stuff from sponsors and whatnot and what have yous. So make sure everyone keep your eyes open, ears to the ground for the Cyberpunk Uncensored official Kickstarter. That hopefully we'll be launching that within a couple weeks. I have to work on some things to set that up. It's still in the works, but we'll see. But that is coming. I did want to mention that.
Yes, they look so cool. You sent me a picture before, and I was like,
they're awesome. I'm so excited about all of that stuff. I can't wait to release it. That being said, thanks everybody in chat for tuning in, being part of the stream. Anybody watching the stream right now, make sure you shoot over to YouTube and subscribe to Cyberpunk Uncensored on YouTube. Anybody watching the VOD on YouTube, make sure you shoot over to Twitch and give a follow to the Cyberpunk Uncensored Twitch channel. I would really appreciate that. Other than that, everyone check out the links in the description once we get this VOD posted, and show us some love. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me, Ellen. You did a great job. It was so much fun.
Thanks. It's always a pleasure.
And I'll see you Thursday for the Sirenscape stream.
That you will.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.